Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to our latest explainer. Today, we are unpacking the incredibly rich, absolutely massive June 2026 edition of the Apophis Journal. If you've been following the journal's trajectory, you know it never, ever shies away from the deep end. But this specific issue, Volume 3, Issue 6, takes a profoundly deep look at the continuity of the self and our living, breathing relationship with the mythic world. We're going to map out exactly how these articles connect and explore how our identities actually stretch across time, across space, and yes, even across the veil of death itself.
Let's move to the roadmap and see how this builds. We're going to cover crossing the mythic threshold, divinity through living devotion, the deep soul's continuity, navigating the unknown region, and finally, brave the winter with the rune of need fire.
Section 1. Crossing the mythic threshold. The path unfolds. This entire journal issue is essentially a threshold in itself.
So, the crucial point is captured beautifully in the editor's opening remarks. The soul does not move in simple sequences, it spirals. We so often default to thinking of our lives, and even our magical progression, as a strict, rigid timeline, just point A to point B. But what really struck me here is how this issue asks us to fundamentally tear that idea down. Our identities are just never as isolated or as linear as we tend to believe. The soul folds. It calls back and forth to itself across distances that literally cannot be measured in years.
To really grasp the grand scale of this mythic world, we've got to talk about the serialized fiction piece, No Future. In a brilliant narrative twist that explores this exact theme of nonlinear identity, the character Edward Kelly actually meets and completely merges with his own future incarnation, Aleister Crowley. It's a staggering moment of fracture and revelation. It perfectly illustrates what happens when the road ahead completely changes shape, proving that our deeper selves are constantly interacting across time.
Let's transition into Section 2, Divinity Through Living Devotion, the God who walks among us.
We're shifting gears from the vast and temporal to something deeply intimate by looking at the Indian folk deity Khandoba. In classical Western myths, you often have figures like Zeus descending from Olympus in disguise, right? It's a supernatural intrusion, often sudden and forceful. But the moonchild motif in Khandoba traditions represents something entirely different. Here, divinity is born through ecstatic devotion and real spiritual intimacy. Notice the progression here: alignment, invocation, consecration, intimacy. It's a beautifully reciprocal relationship. It demonstrates that humanity isn't just sitting around as a passive recipient of the divine. We can actively participate in and cultivate the capacity to actually carry divine force through living devotion.
Moving right along into Section 3, the deep soul's continuity, life beyond the veil.
This section draws from a deeply thought-provoking article called To Live Again, which asks a massive, almost intimidating question. What actually happens when another self of the soul remanifests into living consciousness? Usually humanity defaults to three broad possibilities for death, right? Oblivion, continuation, or rebirth. But the article points out that while the rest of the world argues over these doctrines, the genuine initiate doesn't just settle for blind belief. The initiate seeks lived experience. They want to encounter the mythic world while still in the physical body. And when you do that, well, the author argues you inevitably encounter the dead, not as vague, spooky projections, but as conscious, evolving, present beings.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive paradigm shift. Standard reincarnation usually views lives as beads on a string. One life ends, the next begins, in perfect sequence. But the sixth ed perspective introduced here views lives as branches on a tree. The deep soul exists totally outside of chronological time and extends manifestations of itself simultaneously. So you remain you, absolutely, but you are also part of a much larger living tree where all these manifestations coexist relationally. It's like a giant cosmic puzzle.
Because these manifestations actually coexist as sufficient connections form between them, they can awaken to each other. The author describes the resulting space as the house that we became. Isn't that an incredible phrase? It is a stunning, almost comforting concept, a remembered mythic gathering place literally woven by the deep soul itself. It's a dwelling where your coexisting soul manifestations can meet, heal, and continue becoming together, entirely beyond the veil.
Which perfectly sets up Section 4, Navigating the Unknown Region, Names and Thresholds.
Because, let's be real, if we are going to interact with this vast, interconnected, mythic reality, we absolutely need to know how to do it safely and authentically.
The article name-dropping addresses this head-on with a vital definition of invocation. It reminds us that invoking a spirit is not like dialing a telephone number to reach a fixed, isolated entity. It is the opening of a living, breathing relationship with a hierarchical current. The journal directly calls out the hubris of modern occultism, the magicians who claim to be having casual, everyday chats with the highest ancient powers. In reality, spirit networks are fluid. They're delegated. A serving spirit often acts with the full authority of the greater power, and respecting that hierarchy is absolutely crucial for genuine practice.
Now, what's absolutely fascinating is that this mythic navigation ultimately leads us to a final threshold, the labyrinth. Before you even enter the labyrinth of the fourth head work, you find yourself at an ancient twilight mound. And listen, you are rarely alone there. You might encounter a prehistoric gathering, ancient watchers who have seen countless souls cross over. To approach the labyrinth means willingly surrendering your modern adult certainty. It means standing right before the unknown, accompanied by unseen soulkin who have gathered specifically to witness your initiation.
There are highly specific, necessary steps before making this descent. Sit beside the fire. Listen to the old stories. Accept the torch. You literally cannot rush this preparation. And that torch you are handed, it's incredibly symbolic. It represents the fragile continuity of your own conscious awareness that you're about to carry down into the dark depths of the mystery.
And finally, we arrive at Section 5, the Rune of Needfire, the Green Road. This section highlights the start of a brand new initiatory tale by Jon van Gengi. It encodes a profound magical working within a story of endurance, necessity, and magic right at the bitter edge of winter. At the core of this is Nauthis, the Rune of the Needfire. In the story, we meet Eric, a cooper whose entire life has shrunk to mere survival during a brutal winter, and Sive, a mysterious woman from Vanaheim. Nauthis is the essential fire that only ignites when all excess, all comfort, has been completely stripped away. It's the friction of absolute necessity. Sive challenges Eric, pointing out something crucial. He has mistaken mere endurance for actually living.
And she asks him a question that just sits incredibly heavy in the chest. It's a question I want to leave you with today as we wrap up this explainer. What have you not allowed yourself to desire? Wow, it's a provocative, deeply personal challenge coming straight from the source material. When your need grows larger than your fear, well, that is when the true initiatory path begins. So, what is your need fire? Think on that, and we'll see you in the next explainer.